Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to today's insider session on building psychological safety in high-pressure environments with Adam Schmidt. Before we begin, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. The session is being recorded, and within a few days, you will receive an email with both the slides and the recording. You can ask questions using the Q&A box you see on your screen, and Adam will answer as many questions as he can after his presentation. My name is Scott Levine. I'm the membership manager here at the IEEE Computer Society. Today's insider session focuses on essential business skills designed to help you excel in your current role and support your career growth. As mentioned, joining us today is Adam Schmidt, CEO and principal coach at Smart Summit Coaching LLC. Adam has more than 15 years of leadership and consulting experience. He has an exceptional ability to guide others to overcome obstacles. Adam is an International Coaching Federation and professional certified coach. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today, and the floor is yours to get us started.
Thank you so much, Scott. Great to be back with IEEE. And today we're going to talk about a topic that you may have heard about. And it is a topic that, of course, within the short time we have together, the intent is not to make you an expert, to have you in a position to pontificate at long length about this to friends and family, but to make you aware of this idea of psychological safety in the workplace, and not only what it means for you, but what it means for you as a leader in your organization, as a colleague in your organization, as a subordinate within your organization, all these different roles, how you can bring it to life, how you can be a component of psychological safety within your organization. It's my hope that with just a little bit of information today, you can go back to your organization and be a bellwether for how's it going here? Is this a place where we feel like we can speak up? Is this a place where we can feel confident in our abilities to step forward with ideas and many other ways that psychological safety comes up? So that's our intent today. And so let's begin with just thinking about some of our topics for today's discussion. As I mentioned, of course, we're going to talk about what is psychological safety and, of course, what it's not. A lot of myths out there about what psychological safety covers. How do we recognize it when it exists? What does it feel like? What do we see? What do we hear when psychological safety is present? What can leaders do to build and protect psychological safety? Notice those words are used with great intention. We have to not only build psychological safety, we have to sustain it and protect it consistently. It's not a policy that we write and then collects dust on the shelf. This is an active day-to-day process of sustaining psychological safety in our organizations. How can team members and non-leaders contribute meaningfully? I hope all of you leave today with just one idea of how can I, as a leader, how can I, as a subordinate, how can I, as a supervisor, whatever role you might have, contribute to a psychologically safe environment? We'll also talk about some practical tools, some next steps, and I'll offer a few ideas for additional training and thinking on the subject. So those are our topics for today's discussion. Now, before we do a little bit of a poll to kind of sense where the room is on psychological safety, let's just think about its origins and agree on a definition, at least for today. There are many tweaks to this in the industry, but today we'll agree that psychological safety talks about the climate or environment where individuals feel comfortable and secure, expressing their thoughts, ideas, and concerns without fear of negative consequences. It's not about comfort or consensus. Psychological safety does not mean we all have to get along. In fact, it might mean the opposite, that I disagree with John about this. I disagree with Sally on the deadline for this project, but I feel free to speak up, and I'm okay if my idea is not accepted. Psychological safety enables performance, especially under uncertainty. And of course, the title of today's discussion is Psychological Safety in High Pressure Environments. So we're going to think about when we are under pressure, how does that change our measure of psychological safety, and how much more difficult does it become to create a psychologically safe environment? The origin of this concept is from a psychologist named Amy Edmondson. It was her research in the early 2000s that really gave shape to this idea of psychological safety. So know that as we talk about this, it is something that is still relatively new in the space of org psychology. It had been brought up in the context of Dan Goldman's work in emotional intelligence in the 90s, but it was Amy Edmondson who really brought some shape to the psychological safety structure. And it's why it's still seeping into organizations at varying rates. Some organizations have doubled down on it. They talk about it all the time. It might be a part of their onboarding process. Other organizations are just beginning to appreciate the importance of psychological safety. As I prepared for this webinar, I couldn't help but think about the Boeing Corporation. All of us might remember the news stories from the late 2010s, so 2016, 17, 18, 19, when Boeing had some serious psychological safety issues highlighted by the fact that their airplanes had some uh, malfunctioning parts, some parts that were not as safe as they should have been, and of course had dramatic consequences. And those individuals designing those parts did not feel safe enough to speak up, nor did the leadership feel safe enough to their more senior stockholders to say there's something wrong with this aircraft. A tremendous example of where psychological safety was at risk and was not in place, sustained and protected in a way where people could say, I can speak up. It's about courage and candor. So with that, Scott, let's launch the poll. Now that we've got a sense of psychological safety, and there's just two questions that we want to do. Which of these best describes how you feel about speaking up on your current team? And there's a few different answers there. I freely speak up and feel heard, sometimes but not always, often hold back, rarely speak up, or you're currently not on a team, and that's okay too. Second question, what do you think is the biggest barrier to psychological safety in most teams? Now that we've got a rough and relatively broad definition, what do you think is the biggest barrier to psychological safety in most teams? Unsupportive or inconsistent leadership, pressure to perform perfectly, fear of being judged or blamed, lack of trust. Let's just take a minute.
So the poll questions should be on to the right of your screen next to the presentation window where it says polling.
Yeah,
And
thanks,
you
Scott.
can
That's where I
both
see
of
them too.
those at the same time.
That's great. Feel free to throw your votes in there. Let us know. And so about half so far feel freely to speak up and be heard. But more than a third speak up sometimes, but not always, often hold back out of caution. Now less than half, thanks for the additional votes. Now just a third freely speak up. And so this is a real thing. This is very much happening in our lives, right? Only about a third feel free to speak up. A quarter speak up sometimes, but not always. Yeah, thanks for this great feedback. As to the second question, what do you think is the biggest barrier? Some agreement about unsupportive or inconsistent leadership. We're going to talk about what that looks like today, how you might be able to play a role. A third say a lack of trust among team members. We'll talk about what that looks like today too. Fear of being judged or blamed, 10%. Let's keep these numbers in mind as we move forward in our discussion today, that this is something that's happening for everyone. Even those attending today's webinar are exposed to this space. We want to open up psychological safety a little bit and think about its different components. And I'd encourage you all to maybe make a note to yourself. Just grab a sticky note, or I've got a little notebook in front of me here, anything you have, to jot down which aspect of psychological safety. We're going to talk about 4 of them. Amy Edmondson calls them stages. Is the one that you're actually talking about when you provided this poll, that, well, I speak up sometimes, but not always, or I often hold back out of caution. Let's think about what you were really feeling or thinking about. So here's the 4 stages. First up, inclusion safety. I feel accepted. I feel like I belong. I'm a part of this team. They won't let me down. They won't kick me out. I won't be shunned. I am included unconditionally. The second, learner safety. I feel safe to ask questions and experiment. This often sounds like, what if we tried this? It might sound like, I agree, but I wonder what would happen if we combine both of these ideas. I feel safe to ask questions and experiment. Contributor safety. I feel safe to offer ideas. Hey, Mike, I've got a new idea on how we can approach this new software design. It is going to set us back a couple weeks, but I think it really could save us in the long run. Do I feel safe to contribute? And then finally, challenge. Do I feel safe to challenge the status quo? Right? And I can't help but think of, to mention again, that Boeing documentary I watched on Netflix. Did the engineers at Boeing feel safe to challenge the status quo, to speak up and say, this is wrong? There's something unsafe here. It'll force us to change the way things work. So just jot down, if you can, reflect on, was it inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, challenger safety? This helps us get a better feel for where we might need to address psychological safety if we know exactly what we're talking about, if we can point to it and say, this is challenger safety, this is learner safety. Some common myths and misunderstandings about psychological safety, and these are often born out of minds that think psychological safety is an unnecessary soft skill. They might think it is something that is superfluous to progress, that gets in the way. They might think it is something that is only for folks who need to feel good all the time or feel happy all the time. It's quite the opposite. Psychological safety means we have an environment where we can disagree passionately about something, and do so in a way that's respectful, thoughtful, and productive. So one myth, it means being nice all the time. I always have to say, yes, I agree. I agree, Sally. Your idea is great. Yes, I agree, John. That's a good idea. Let's do that. That is not what psychological safety is. It's about honesty and respect, not avoiding conflict. It might sound like, Sally, I appreciate that idea, but I have to say my biggest concern is that it would triple our budget in the next quarter. And is there any way we can do this without such a dramatic impact to our budget? Yes, and It's only the leader's responsibility. Myth number 2. Every team member plays a role in creating safety. Every team member plays a role in creating safety. Psychological safety comes from all areas of an organization, subordinates, superiors, and peers alike. If there is a responsibility on the shoulders of a leader, which some of you in this room might be, it's to ensure that this type of information, psychological safety, the idea of psychological safety, is welcome and invited in your space. That is the leader's responsibility. But as a protection and sustainment exercise, we are all in the business of psychological safety. And then finally, I've heard this as recently as just a couple of weeks ago, it lowers accountability. It means, well, we can pretty much get away with anything because this is a psychologically safe place. I can say anything I want and I'll never get in trouble. Now, the truth is it enables high accountability and continuous learning. The truth is it allows you to be heard. It allows your ideas to be honored, reflected on, your challenges to be reflected on and honored, to be processed by the group. It enables high accountability and continuous learning. The opposite is employees harbor their challenges, their disagreements, their disgruntlement, and we create a toxic workplace where secretly this team doesn't actually want to support this project the way it's going. Secretly, our chief technology officer doesn't agree with the CEO. This creates a toxic environment and a recipe for failure. For those of you in the poll who were lucky enough to say that I freely speak up and feel heard, that ended up being just about a quarter of you in the room. You might recognize some of this. I'm using all of my senses in my professional workplace, what I see, what I hear, what I feel. So what do I see in a psychologically safe workplace? People are offering their ideas without hesitation. I see equal participation across teams, an open acknowledgement of mistakes. That budget error is on me. I've learned that I need to make sure quality control sees the product before it leaves the door, and I'll do that in our next iteration, whatever it might be. Some of the things I hear when an environment is psychologically safe, I don't know, but here's a thought. And that can sound simple, but there's a really powerful phrase right there. I don't know. I don't know can feel dangerous to say sometimes in our professional environment. But in a psychologically safe place, we can feel at home saying, I'm not sure. I'm going to go find out. I don't know. I need to learn more about that. I don't know. But here's a thought. What if next time we added more quality control? Whatever it might sound like. That's a great point. Let's explore it. Again, look at the simple phrasing here that can feel threatening in some environments. And maybe all of us have, even if in the moment you can freely speak up and be heard, you can identify with some of these things. Notice in the second bullet under what I hear, that's a great point. We are honoring someone else's work. And in psychologically unsafe places and toxic work environments, it can feel strange to highlight someone else's success or their great idea. That's a great point. Let's explore it. Thanks for being honest about that. What do we feel? We feel safe to speak up without fear. We feel trusted and respected. Going back to our slide earlier, we feel like we belong. We are included, that we will not be kicked off the team for saying, I don't know. and we're comfortable with being ourselves, even when uncertain. How we know when we have psychological safety. This is what we see, we hear, and we feel. Let's take a look at the other side of the coin. How we know when we don't have it. People stay silent in meetings. Oftentimes, senior voices dominate the conversations, or what we would call a D from a, if any of you have taken the DISC assessment, D, a dominant voice, owns the conversation, even if not necessarily in a leadership role. Well, we're going to do it this way, and I'm not interested in hearing anyone's concerns. This was again the case at Boeing. Avoidance of disagreement or conflict. We sidestep someone's challenge. We sidestep someone else's idea that might throw the schedule off. What do we hear when we know we don't have a psychologically safe environment, or we don't feel safe? We hear these phrases, and I'm sure many of you have heard this one in the last couple days. This might be a dumb question, but this is someone who doesn't feel safe asking their question. This might be a dumb question. This is a symptom of an environment where someone feels like they might be excluded or judged for being curious. Silence after asking for feedback or ideas. This might sound like, thanks for that briefing on the new piece of software, Scott. Who has any feedback for Scott? Silence. Crickets, right? No one's curious. People feel like they might embarrass Scott if they give feedback. This can be indicative of a psychologically unsafe environment. And we all know how this can feel: anxious about being judged, reluctant to admit your mistakes, disconnected or disengaged from the team. I bet all of us can reflect on our professional careers, even if they are largely academic so far, and think about someone you had to work with on a group project or a project in the real world. No matter how big or small, maybe it was $1 billion project, or maybe it was $100 project. Someone was reluctant to admit their mistake. They wouldn't say, it was my fault that the drone didn't get off the ground. I forgot to charge the batteries. It's my fault. Instead, we hear deflection, redirection. The plug didn't work. The charger failed. John never told me I had to charge the batteries. We're reluctant to admit a mistake because we feel like we might not be included. We feel like we might not be heard. We might be judged. That is how we know we don't have psychological safety. Let's pivot our thinking a little bit to add in this layer of complexity: high pressure environments. We know what psychological safety is now, when we have it, when we don't, what's true about it, what's a myth about it. But what makes an environment high pressure? Urgent deadlines with no room or little room for delay. This has to be done right now. This has to be done by next week. If we don't get this out the door, we will miss our deadline. High visibility environments. Leadership, clients, or public are watching closely. I'm thinking about the public in particular. When we think about the public watching closely, this isn't them peering through the windows. These are people like our stockholders, people awaiting the next financial update, people awaiting the next report on a new technology that you're supposed to be developing. High visibility environments. Unclear expectations or constantly shifting priorities. Things change so rapidly, we're not even sure what direction we're supposed to be going. It feels even more pressured if we don't know where we're supposed to be headed. The deadline's next week, but I'm just not getting any clear guidance on what actually needs to be done. I'd be happy to do it, but my leader's not telling me. High consequences for failure. If we don't make this deadline, it's very unlikely we're going to be able to convince our investors to give us the next round of funding. Those consequences, of course, can be real or perceived. It doesn't matter. Either can create a high pressure environment. I want to think about for a minute, in these high pressure environments where psychological safety may be hard to find, what do we do if we don't have it? If any of you who respond to the poll find yourself in an imperfect, sometimes psychologically unsafe space, what do we do? Leaders create space for honesty by naming what's hard. We acknowledge the fear and make it discussable. That might sound like, I could tell in yesterday's monthly status report that there was some disagreement about the best way ahead to get the product off the ground next month. Let's bring that up today. And I'll start with the question, what is going to get in our way of a great product? Leaders use things like open questions to make it more discussable. How do I make fear more discussable? I ask curious, open questions to create space for honesty. I can model vulnerability. I can share my own mistakes and uncertainties to set the tone. Everyone, I need to come clean on something. I think I set the deadline too short on this one. Maybe I overestimated how quickly we could get this done, and so I'm going to push it out at least another week. And what I've learned from this is it takes more time to get that code right than I thought it would. So I appreciate everyone's feedback, and in particular, I'd like to thank John, Sally, and Owen from the coding team for highlighting to me some of my blind spots and how long it would take to do this. I'm modeling vulnerability. I'm modeling to my staff, I can be wrong, and it's okay if I'm wrong. I establish and reinforce respectful team norms. Clarity helps teams know what's safe and what's expected. I support psychological safety at all levels by inviting quieter voices, honoring risk taking. I don't know if anyone noticed, but Owen went out on a limb here and said, I can get that done by next week. And guess what? Here he is. He's delivered us a great piece of code. And the product is off to a great start because of that. And we challenge respectfully. I can appreciate your perspective, John, but I am concerned about how the budget may be impacted by this. How do you think the budget might be impacted? Practice microactions as a team habit. What's something we're not saying? I want to avoid triangulating. Triangulating, if it's not a term you're familiar with, it talks about using someone else to deliver your thought. It might sound like, hey, John, at the end of the meeting, can you go to Sally and just kind of nudge her on the deadline because we're falling behind again, and I'm worried that she's not going to be able to get this to us on time. I'm putting someone else in a position to send my feedback. So what's something I'm not saying? Go direct and kind. Sally, I'm going to work with John on this as your supervisor. I am worried that we could be behind on that deadline. How can we support you to get there? So micro actions. Begin to think about And this is an exercise we'll do at the end of our webinar today. What are some of the micro actions you can begin to take at your organization? Some of the small things you've heard so far, just in you, not to fix anyone else. Let's not pretend that we're going to leave here and you're going to go and say, okay, you need to do this and you do that. What can you do to begin to invite more psychological safety into your professional environment, your academic environment, wherever it might find you? Let's just talk about leaders in particular for a second. We've talked at length about what everyone can do. Leaders in particular can model psychological safety by showing that vulnerability we talked about. We can frame by positioning uncertainty and risk as expected and necessary. This is a necessary risk. We've got to extend the deadline though, because I want this done correctly. We can invite by asking open questions that draw out multiple perspectives. What are the concerns here? What might get in our way of success? How are we feeling about the deadline? And if you've attended some of the other webinars I've done, you can hear this recurring theme about open questions. I can't encourage leaders enough to use open questions that start with what and how. How can we get through this together? What might get in our way? What do we need to inspire us to get this project done? The reason open questions work is that they offer space for curiosity as opposed to closed questions, which might shut down your audience. Are there any questions? Ooh, this closes down our audience. What are we curious about? It's the same question, just a little bit differently to invite more responses. So if you're a leader in this space, begin to think about, how do I use open questions more than closed questions? And then finally respond, thank input, and never punish risk taking. If we see someone get bopped like whack-a-mole for taking a risk, we've created an environment where risk is no longer acceptable. If risk doesn't work out, that's okay. We talk about it. We frame it as expected and necessary. We did have to take a risk last week and see if the old code would work for this new product. And regrettably, we found out it doesn't. So we've extended the deadline by 2 weeks. And thanks to Owen and Mike and Sally in our coding team, they're going to take a crack at developing some new code for us. But let's give a big thank you to the team that tried to use the old code and took a little bit of a risk for us. Thank you very much. Gratitude and not punishing risk taking. For the non-leaders in the room, we sustain psychological safety. Maybe even create it if we're in a space where it really feels far away. We can invite others in and encourage you again to begin thinking about, what's a little thing I can do? I can ask quieter teammates for their thoughts. Again, model vulnerability. Share my own questions. Show bravery. Who would have thought courage shows up as asking a simple question without caveating it, without this might be a dumb question, or I'm not sure if this is even relevant, or any of the other myriad ways we hear people sort of caveat their contributions to make sure they don't sound too silly. I'll share my own questions with bravery. Maybe I share a learning moment to signal it's okay to be imperfect. My mistake, my blind spot on that deadline. I respond with appreciation and gratitude when someone takes a risk or shares a hard truth. Holy cow, Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing that the deadline for this product is too tight. We were going to have to sacrifice key safety controls, and that's unacceptable. So thank you for letting us know. And I've accepted your recommendation of a 1-week extension. Let's do that. Communicate directly and kindly. This is that triangulation where we bounce feedback off of someone else. We communicate directly and kindly. We avoid gossip or side conversations. Did you hear Owen's silly question? Did you hear Zach's silly question about the code? We speak to people, not about them. And this is a psychologically safe environment when we're able to do so. A quick case study for us today to help us think through what this might look like. I'll read it briefly, and we can all kind of think about some of the choices we might need to make as both leader and peer in this fictional case study. So Cybernova is a fast-growing tech company. They specialize in cybersecurity, and the product innovation team was formed 6 months ago to lead development on a critical new feature with a tight deadline. It includes developers, designers, analysts, many of whom are new to the company and each other. High visibility product, and the leadership expects a beta launch in 60 days. So a high pressure environment with some pretty clear pressure, both internal and external. Here's our challenge. Timelines are being met, but recent team meetings have grown increasingly quiet. Fewer ideas are shared. Retrospectives yield little feedback. Junior members rarely, if ever, speak, and senior engineer recently confided, look, people are just trying not to mess up. We just want to get through this and get the product to market. Jordan, the team lead, has grown frustrated by the silence and the lack of energy. We want to create a culture of openness and innovation, but worry that pushing too hard could make things worse. High pressure environment and some initial symptoms of a low psychological safety level. We've got quiet meetings, very few ideas being shared, not much feedback being given. Junior members in particular not speaking up, and senior members, those dominant voices, are saying, just be quiet. Let's think about what will we do in this moment. Option A, schedule one-on-one check-ins with each team member to ask how they're feeling about the project, what's working, and what's getting in the way of full participation. Option B, at the next team meeting, directly name the silence and ask the team what would make it easier to speak up or share half-formed ideas. Let them know you've noticed and want to improve together. Option C, email the team a new set of expectations for future meetings, including speak at least once rule and a rotating idea starter role to kick off conversations. There are attractive things about each of these options, and I put them here because they're all very real ways that leaders might approach this. And so it can be sometimes difficult to assess what might be best in this moment for the healing, protecting, and creation of psychological safety. Now, to pull back the curtain a little bit, there are a few questions that we might ask ourselves before we choose which option to go with. They sound like this. Am I trying to fix the symptom, the silence, or address the cause, lack of safety? Do my team members currently have a way to express concerns without fear? Have I made it psychologically safe to share bad news or half-baked ideas? Am I modeling the vulnerability and curiosity I want to see in others? I hope that as a result of today's discussion, if you are faced with a circumstance not so far-fetched as our case study, and we'll go back to the options in a moment, we know just enough to ask ourselves some of these questions. What kind of environment is this? Did I model what I want to see for my team? And is there a way that people can speak up without feeling unsafe? And so if I go through these questions, I can revisit these options with just a touch more clarity. A leadership coach would argue that option B could be a good place to start, a first choice. If there is some concern that an environment is psychologically unsafe, one-on-one meetings could be too much too quick. Emailing new expectations could feel distant and directive. We might start with option B. Then we might move to option A after we've named the silence and said, how do we move together? To help me unpack that, I'll meet with each of you informally one-on-one over some coffee to think about what's working, what's not, and how do we get better. It is after that I might consider thinking about, hey, I've talked to everyone one-on-one, and I know we've talked about our challenge here of the silence in our room or in our meetings, and we have some new expectations. In fact, we've got an idea called speak at least once, or an idea starter role. These aren't bad ideas in and of themselves, but we want to be thoughtful as leaders. How do I order these options to make sure that the psychological safety can be created in this space? Option B, then A, then C might be how we approach this. We can appreciate how C would be too rough right away. Option A could put people on their heels. B seems like a good place to start. Together, let's name this. Just a quick case study for us. Thanks for walking through that with me. Simple actions for you. Ask a question at your next meeting. Own a recent mistake or learning moment for you. Invite quieter voices to share. If you haven't identified some little thing you can do yet, I wanted to highlight a few that might be low-hanging fruit for you. Ask a question in the next meeting. See how it feels. Own a recent mistake. Invite a quieter voice to share. Zach, we always appreciate hearing your perspective as the expert product sales leader in the room. How do you think this change might impact the next quarter? See if you can pick one and connect it all the way back to one of our earlier slides when we thought about those different ways that psychological safety showed up. The challenge safety, the learner safety, the inclusion safety. Which one did you identify as the thing that might be happening in your organization? And what's one small thing you can do? If challenge safety is my problem, how can I address that? What's one small thing I might be able to do? We're right on track time-wise here because I'll open the floor for Q&A after I just mention a few items of additional training. Big fan of TED Talks. You can hear direct from the source. So Amy Edmondson, she has one. And of course, the link is a bit clumsy there, but no need, of course, to jot it down. Just Google Amy Edmondson's TED Talk, and it'll quickly show up for you in YouTube. It's not too long. I think that one is less than 15 minutes. Well worth a look. She goes, of course, of course, she goes into much greater depth into less of what we've talked about today, kind of the practical things that you can do, and more of the psychological background of creating a safe place for people to communicate professionally, communicate personally, and grow together. Check out Project Aristotle, summary of what makes teams effective with psychological safety at the top. So just one framework that is out there that shows how psychological safety is integrated into successful teams. And finally, an HBR article that talks about high-performing teams need psychological safety. This article in particular, I've listed here. If you feel like you need to inspire others in your organizations from a reputable source, consider HBR a reputable source. That's something you can share with your colleagues and say, this is the type of thinking that we need to introduce here at XYZ company. And notice that article, that HBR article, is from 2017, right? So again, this is, I think cutting edge is probably too late, but it's certainly something that leaders are just beginning to honor as a place that requires attention and intention to integrate into their spaces. So if you find yourself in a culture that is not psychologically safe, fear not, you are not alone. But there are steps you can take both as an individual and as a leader to begin integrating it into your workplace. So let me go to a last slide here. And yeah, I'm just going to welcome questions at this point. And Scott, Michelle, I hope I do this right. Let's see here. I do not believe it is, so I'll go through these one at a time. Mark asked, let me see if I can highlight these. Appreciate everyone's great questions. So I'll read them aloud and go through them here. I'll put up my contact info as well while we do this in case you guys would like to get in touch or have any follow-on questions. I do not believe the HBR article is paywalled. That one should be free. I put up, I was able to search it, and I'm not a subscriber, Mark, so hopefully you can too. Maybe you can find it out there on the free web somewhere. Yeah, and appreciate you highlighting that. One comment here, if we don't get an answer from option B in our case study, so option B, of course, was go to the room. Thank you for putting those up on the ticker, Scott. If we don't get an answer from option B in the meeting, that was the one where we name the silence, could be some time for self-reflection there, right? Am I creating some psychological safety issues? And I can get some feedback either from my staff. Maybe I need a 360 assessment, work with my leadership coach, and begin thinking about what can I do to improve that. Is the meeting being recorded? I will have to defer to Scott. I believe it is, and it'll be available on the IEEE site. Michelle, Scott, can either of you speak to where this will live in infamy after we're done?
Yeah, you'll get an email a day or two after, and as Adam said, it will live in our digital library and on our YouTube page.
Excellent. Yep. Thanks for that. And yeah, I appreciate the other example. I was using Boeing a little bit. Mark offered that the Space Shuttle Challenger accident was another example of Challenger safety. And in that case, if I'm not mistaken, the engineers actually did try to speak up and documented the case, and it was ignored by leadership, right? So this is an example of we spoke up, but the pressure, the external pressure, in that case to show Congress that there was progress being made, that the space shuttle program was ready to go at a moment's notice and would stay on schedule, was too great. And it was not a psychologically safe space for NASA to say, we're not ready to go. And there is a serious safety concern with, I believe it was the O-rings below freezing or something like that. So thanks for that comment. I'm happy to stay on board for other questions. Those are the ones that I have in the Q&A.
I don't see any other questions either, Adam. So I think that is a wrap for today. So thank you for your great presentation. Lot of great information in there. Very informative. I think gave everyone a really good baseline to you know take the next steps for making their workplaces safer, or bringing attention to their upper management if it's not.
Hmm. Yep, I
Um,
agree, Steve.
so with that, we will wrap up. Um, Adam, thank you again for joining us today. Just a quick programming note. We have a couple upcoming webinars. We have one on the 24th, which I believe is Tuesday at 9 a.m. It's from our Standards Activities Board series. It will focus on our smart manufacturing and test technology standards. And then our next webinar from this series, which is your Career Accelerator Insider sessions, we have interactive training skills for engineers. In the same email you get with the recording and the slides, you'll see links to register for both of those webinars. Adam, thank you again, and thank you everyone for attending and your participation in the polls and your questions. And we hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.